cards, bank accounts, personal information. That's what we usually think about when we hear about hacking.
Big concern that hackers could get into this.
But days before his big announcement, he's found dead.
July 25th, 2013. A cybersecurity expert is scheduled to demonstrate something terrifying at the world's largest hacker conference in Las Vegas. He's going to show 3,000 people how to wirelessly stop a human heart from 300 feet away. His name is Barnaby Jack. 7 days before his presentation, Barnaby tells a reporter he's discovered something even bigger, something involving drug delivery systems in hospitals across America, something that could affect thousands of patients simultaneously. The conference organizers have already printed his name in the program. Security experts have flown in from around the world. The medical device companies are terrified. But Barnaby Jack never makes it to that stage. On July 25th at 3:30 p.m., friends find him unresponsive in his San Francisco apartment. He's 35 years old, in perfect health, no warning signs. Within hours, his research disappears. His laptop vanishes. The demonstration is canceled. The official explanation? An accidental overdose. But the technical evidence tells a very different story. This is the forensic investigation into Barnaby Jack, the hacker who knew too much. Barnaby Jack wasn't a criminal. He was a white hat researcher. He found security vulnerabilities and reported them so companies could fix the problems before criminals could exploit them. In 2010, he became famous at the Black Hat Conference in Las Vegas. He walked on stage with 2 ATM machines, a Tranax Minibank 1500 and a Triton RL 5000. These were the exact models used in convenience stores and gas stations across America. Barnaby typed a few commands on his laptop. Suddenly, both machines started spitting out cash, bills flying everywhere. The crowd went silent. He called it jackpotting. Here's how it worked technically. Most ATMs at the time ran on Windows XP embedded. Barnaby discovered that many manufacturers used default master keys to access the administrative functions. He created a rootkit, malicious software that took control of the ATM's operating system. Once installed, his software could bypass the cash dispensing authorization. The machine thought it was receiving legitimate commands from the bank's central server, but it was actually receiving commands from Barnaby's laptop. The vulnerability wasn't just theoretical. Criminals in Eastern Europe had already been exploiting it for months, but nobody in the financial industry was talking about it. Barnaby immediately contacted the ATM manufacturers and helped them develop security patches. He wasn't trying to steal, he was trying to protect. Banks around the world upgraded their systems. Barnaby had just saved the financial industry millions of dollars. And that's when the medical device companies started to worry. Because in 2011, Barnaby turned his attention to something far more dangerous. Pacemakers and insulin pumps. Devices connected wirelessly to hospital networks. Devices that, according to Barnaby, had worse security than those ATMs. By 2012, over 3 million Americans were living with implanted pacemakers. These devices used wireless telemetry systems operating on specific radio frequencies, typically 402 to 405 megahertz in the medical implant communication service band. Doctors could adjust settings remotely using a programmer device held near the patient's chest. Hospitals could monitor patients from across the building using the same wireless protocol. It was convenient, efficient, and according to Barnaby, fundamentally insecure. He bought several used pacemakers and insulin pumps on the secondary market. He reverse engineered the firmware, and what he discovered was shocking. Most medical devices used a communication protocol called MIX, Medical Implant Communication Service. The problem? The signal was completely unencrypted. No authentication, no password protection, no verification that commands were coming from legitimate medical equipment. Here's the technical breakdown. When a doctor's programmer sent a signal to a pacemaker, it transmitted on a specific frequency with a device identifier. But that identifier wasn't secret. It was broadcast openly. Anyone with a software-defined radio and the right antenna could intercept it, decode it, and replicate it. Barnaby built a custom transmitter using off-the-shelf components. Total cost, about $30. With this equipment, he could send commands to a pacemaker from up to 300 feet away. He could change the pacing rate. He could turn off safety limits. He could deliver a high-voltage shock designed for defibrillation, and the device would accept these commands because it had no way to verify they were legitimate. The same vulnerability existed in insulin pumps. These devices used wireless signals to receive commands about insulin dosing. Barnaby demonstrated he could instruct an insulin pump to deliver its entire reservoir, several days' worth of insulin, in a single massive dose. In 2012, at the Breakpoint Security Conference in Melbourne, Australia, Barnaby showed this live. He had a pacemaker on stage connected to monitoring equipment. From across the room, using his laptop and custom antenna, he sent a command. The pacemaker's heart rate jumped from 60 beats per minute to 830 beats per minute, then stopped completely. The medical community was stunned, but the device manufacturers were furious. Companies like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and St. Jude Medical had spent billions developing these devices. They were FDA approved, trusted by hospitals, used by millions. And now a hacker was telling the world they were fundamentally unsafe. Barnaby received threats, legal warnings, pressure to stop his research. But he didn't stop, because in early 2013, he discovered something even more disturbing: hospital drug infusion pumps. And these weren't just vulnerable to one-on-one attacks. They were networked. Hundreds of pumps in a single hospital, all connected to a central monitoring station. If someone hacked the network, they could alter dosages across an entire floor, and it would look like medical errors, not a cyber attack. Barnaby scheduled his presentation for Black Hat 2013, July 25th. He was going to reveal everything: the technical details, the proof of concept code, the exact vulnerabilities. But 7 days before the conference, something changed. July 18th, 2013, 1 week before his presentation, Barnaby contacts a Reuters reporter named Jim Finkel. He tells him he's discovered vulnerabilities in hospital drug infusion pumps, devices used in intensive care units worldwide to administer chemotherapy, morphine, antibiotics, and other critical medications. The technical issue was similar to the pacemaker vulnerability, but worse. These pumps use networked communication protocols. They connected to hospital pharmacy systems to receive medication orders, but the communication wasn't properly encrypted or authenticated. Barnaby had discovered he could intercept these network signals and alter the dosage commands before they reached the pump. A doctor could order 5 milligrams of morphine, but the pump could be instructed to deliver 500 milligrams, and the hospital's electronic record would show the correct dosage had been ordered. But Barnaby also tells the reporter something concerning. Medical device companies have been contacting him, offering money, offering consulting positions, asking him to delay the presentation until they can develop a fix. Barnaby refuses. He believes the public has a right to know immediately. July 22nd, 3 days before the conference. Colleagues notice Barnaby seems anxious. He mentions receiving legal threats. He jokes that powerful people want him to stay quiet. But his presentation is loaded on his laptop. He's ready. July 24th, 1 day before the demonstration. Barnaby is at his San Francisco apartment. He's supposed to fly to Las Vegas the next morning. His bags are packed. Conference organizers confirm he's registered. But something happens that night. July 25th, 3:30 p.m. Friends arrive at Barnaby's apartment to check on him. He hasn't answered calls. He missed his flight. The door is unlocked. They find him unresponsive. Barnaby Jack is gone. Within hours, the Black Hat Conference cancels his presentation. His research materials are scrubbed from the conference website, and his laptop, the one containing all his drug infusion pump research, disappears. The San Francisco Medical Examiner ruled Barnaby's passing as accidental. The cause? A mixture of prescription medications and other substances. The case was closed within weeks. But here's where the forensic timeline doesn't add up. Barnaby had no history of substance issues. Friends described him as health conscious and disciplined. He was 35 years old, physically fit, preparing for the most important presentation of his career. His family disputed the findings immediately. They said Barnaby was excited, not distressed. They said he'd been receiving threats from unnamed corporate sources, but had dismissed them as standard intimidation tactics. And then there's the missing evidence. Barnaby's primary research laptop was never recovered. It wasn't in his apartment. It wasn't at his office at IO Active, the security firm where he worked. It wasn't in any cloud backup that investigators could locate. Conference organizers at Black Hat claimed they never received his final presentation files, even though Barnaby had confirmed he'd uploaded them to their secure server 3 days earlier. Colleagues said Barnaby followed standard security researcher protocols, encrypted backups, version control systems, colleague review copies. Yet every trace of his drug infusion pump research vanished. Now let's examine the corporate timeline. This is where it gets forensically interesting. Within 6 months of Barnaby's passing, medical device manufacturers filed 14 new patents related to wireless security protocols for implanted devices. These patents specifically addressed the vulnerabilities Barnaby had described in his pacemaker demonstrations: authentication protocols, encrypted telemetry, secure pairing mechanisms. In 2014, the FDA issued its first ever cybersecurity guidance for medical devices. The recommendations matched Barnaby's technical specifications almost exactly. By 2015, Hospira, the manufacturer of the drug infusion pumps Barnaby was researching, released a security update for their PCA3 and PCA5 pump systems. The update added network authentication and encrypted communication. The exact fixes Barnaby was planning to demonstrate were necessary. How did these companies develop comprehensive security solutions in 18 to 24 months when they'd spent the previous decade insisting such vulnerabilities didn't exist? There are only two possibilities. Either they independently discovered the exact same vulnerabilities Barnaby found, or they had access to his research. And there's one more forensic detail that doesn't fit. The estimated time of Barnaby's medical emergency was between 10 p.m. on July 24th and 2 a.m. on July 25th. Friends found him at 3:30 p.m. on July 25th. That's a 13 to 17-hour window. Barnaby was supposed to catch a 6 a.m. flight to Las Vegas. His colleague had arranged to pick him up at 4:30 a.m. When he didn't answer the door or his phone, the colleague assumed he'd gotten a ride from someone else. But why would nobody check on him for over 12 hours when he was scheduled for the biggest presentation of his career? So, what really happened to Barnaby Jack? The official story requires you to believe several coincidences occurred simultaneously. The timing, exactly 1 day before his presentation. The missing laptop, the vanished research files, the unlocked apartment door, the sudden corporate security innovations. But let's look at what was actually at stake. The global medical device market in 2013 was worth over $330 billion annually. Pacemaker manufacturers alone generated $4 billion in revenue. If Barnaby's demonstration proved these devices were fundamentally insecure, the liability exposure would be catastrophic. Every hospital using these devices could face lawsuits. Every manufacturer could face recalls. The FDA would be forced to implement strict cybersecurity regulations that didn't exist. Stock prices for medical device companies would collapse. Insurance premiums would skyrocket. Patient confidence in life-saving technology would evaporate. From a purely technical standpoint, Barnaby's research was irrefutable. He had the proof of concept code. He had the hardware demonstrations. He had the network analysis showing hospital-wide vulnerabilities. The only way to stop that information from becoming public was to stop Barnaby. Today, medical devices have encryption. They require authentication. They undergo cybersecurity testing before FDA approval. In 2017, the FDA recalled 465,000 pacemakers from St. Jude Medical due to the exact wireless vulnerabilities Barnaby had identified 5 years earlier. In 2019, the FDA issued a safety alert about Medtronic insulin pumps that could be hacked remotely. Again, the same vulnerability Barnaby had demonstrated in 2012. His research saved lives. His warnings forced an entire industry to change. But we still don't know what happened in his apartment on July 24, 2013. We don't know who, if anyone, accessed his research laptop. We don't know if his presentation files were deliberately deleted from Black Hat servers. We don't know why his door was unlocked. His family continues to question the official story. They believe a full forensic investigation was never conducted. They believe critical evidence was either overlooked or deliberately ignored. Barnaby Jack was 35 years old. He had no spouse, no children, just his research and his mission to make medical technology safer. At his memorial service, colleagues called him a guardian, someone who put patient safety above corporate profits and personal gain. The question isn't whether Barnaby's research was legitimate. Every vulnerability he identified has since been confirmed and patched. The question is, did someone with billions of dollars at stake decide that research could never go public? And until that question is answered, the mystery of Barnaby Jack's final hours remains unsolved.